Wait, you have a TV?
No. I just like to read the TV guide. Read the TV guide. You don't need a TV.
Television addict! Television addict! Television addict!
Hey everybody, it's Ken Reed here, your TV guidance counselor on the show. TV guidance counselor. Welcome to a brand new edition. We're here each and every week talking about classic television with interesting people, or people at least that I find interesting, and thus far for the last 7+ years, you have found interesting, for the most part. There's two exceptions. I'm kidding. There's no exceptions. There's two. No, there isn't really. You can guess who those two people are. There aren't two people. Anyway, one person who is very interesting is my guest this week. My guest is author Chris Morgan. Chris has written a new book about the 90s in Nickelodeon, and we discuss quite a bit of Nickelodeon here. Chris has written a bunch of fiction, nonfiction. You probably best know him for the book The Comic Galaxy of Mystery Science Theater 3000, 12 classic episodes in the Movies They Lampoon from back in 2015. If you haven't picked up that book, definitely get that book. I know many listeners of this show are fans of MST3K, and we've had many cast members of MST3K on this show, so if you haven't heard those episodes, go back and listen to those as well. Not right now, you're listening to Chris Morgan's episode, but you can go back and listen to people like Kevin Murphy, you can listen to Joel Hodgson, you can listen to Trace Ballou, you can listen to Frank Conniff, Mary Jo Pehl, there's a lot of people, that's what I'm saying. Pretty much everybody except for Bill and Mike, but you know, maybe some point, maybe it's someday we may have them. Anyway, on to this episode. I'm not talking about old episodes. I'm talking about new ones. And this week's episode is a great one. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode of TV Guidance Counselor, author of the new book about Nickelodeon in the 90s, Mr. Chris Morgan.
TV is my friend, and it has been always there for me in time of need.
Live via satellite from Detroit. Chris Morgan, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. I would like to I always wished I spent more time in Detroit. It's a cool place.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, I mean, I lived in LA for a few years, but then I came back here like 4 some odd years ago. So obviously, you know, I agree it is a nice place to be and all that.
You grew up there?
Yeah, I grew up here, and then I went out to Los Angeles, you know, the whole quasi showbiz thing, trying to be a TV writer was, very unsuccessful. Not a total failure, but very unsuccessful. And eventually I just I'll just, head back to, Detroit. And I've been happy with that decision so far.
I would say very unsuccessful, but not a total failure is already better than most people that move to LA.
I suppose. Yeah. But you never hear people the only thing you ever hear about is the successful people. So then there needs to be more people like me who are very unsuccessful. They'd be like, yeah, no, we're out there too. People who are very unsuccessful, did just enough every year to justify staying for that one more year.
Yes.
And then, so eventually you hit that breaking point.
Where you're like, all right, do I want to eat and survive or try another week?
Yeah.
But weirdly, a ton of people, and I'll get off Detroit in a moment, but it's a cool city. So a ton of people, especially that I've had on this show, but that end up out in LA doing stuff and that I've had on are from that area. Like Allie Willis, who wrote the Friends theme and passed away last year, but she was from Detroit and was all about Detroit. And then, you got, of course, all the music and Iggy Pop and Marshall Crenshaw and Paul Feig and all that kind of stuff. So it's a weird for a Midwest. Does it count as the Midwest?
Yeah, no, it's considered the Midwest. That's always considered nebulous, but I've always heard it being Midwest. So I call it Midwest, and I'm from here, so I'm an authority on it. I can declare it's Midwest.
So for a Midwest state, there's kind of a lot of people that have, a lot of people who've made some cool stuff have been sort of pumped out of it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And, the MC5, the Motor City 5, right there, starting with all that sort of stuff, very, very much really a lot of, good has come out of the area. Also Kid Rock, which we have, although I would like to say that he is somebody I don't consider from Detroit. He's from Michigan, but he was actually from this suburb that's so far from Detroit. It's like if you were I don't have, I try to think of like a good analogy related to Los Angeles, but then that's only a portion of the United States as well. Basically, he lived like an hour and a half drive from Detroit, but he still, claims it as a city. But I like to try and he's push aside the whole Kid Rock Detroit aspect of it for obvious reasons. No, he's from the exurbs at best.
Well, yeah, because he's a rich kid, right? He's kind of from a pretty rich suburb.
And he grew out but when he grew up, it would have been completely the country. Now it's still pretty much the country, but back then it would have been nothing but land and houses and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so he grew up in the country, but it's kind of ritzy country, right?
If people everybody had so much land out there, and people have big houses on a lot of land, and it's not even suburban. It's beyond that.
It's like people who would have enough land to most dangerous game hunt other human beings in.
You could definitely, because my grandparents moved out there at some point. They weren't even had that much money, but still had a ton of land. So if you had money and you're out there, you could have land. You could own an entire street's worth of land and just do whatever you pleased out there.
Your own sovereign nation. But you're also on the Canadian border, which leads me to this issue of TV Guide that you picked, which was October 25th to the 31st, 1997. And the reason you picked this is because you're working on a book about Nickelodeon, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I have a book coming out called The Nickelodeon 90s, subtitled Cartoons, Game Shows, and a Whole Bunch of Slime. I wrote for that book an essay about every single Nickelodeon show that aired an original episode in the 90s. So that includes shows that started in the 80s, You Can't Do That on Television, or a Hey Dude, or shows that started at the end of the 90s, like a SpongeBob SquarePants. It's mostly thought of as a post-90s show. But so yeah, if a show aired an original episode on Nickelodeon in the 90s, I wrote an essay about it. It's just, basically every chapter is about a show and my thoughts and feelings and what have you about, I consider it the heyday of Nickelodeon, but to be fair, it's because I was a child at the time. So it's, it's for, the quote unquote 90s kids out there. So yeah, basically it's the book for the people who grew up on that sort of TV and, now buy books about stuff from the 90s.
Yeah, well, it's always in 20-year cycles. So,
yeah,
the nostalgia wave. Because I'm probably a little bit older than you. So my Nickelodeon sort of mid-'80s to late 80s. Although I was watching in the early 90s. I always say maybe the first 2 years of Snick.
Yeah.
And, Pete and Pete was kind of the last show that I really was absolutely in love with on Nickelodeon. But I bring it up because the era you're writing about is sort of the era when Nick finally got rid of all the Canadian shows.
Yeah, because the early days of Nickelodeon, it started off as it started off as a thing called Pinwheel in the very early days of cable, and cable was a very rare thing. And then it was very taking on Canadian programs, or that cartoon David the Gnome, which I found out writing the book was Spanish originally. It was a Spanish cartoon, and then they sort of redubbed. And a lot of kids, their one first big hit thing was You Can't Do That on Television, was started in Canada, and then the first original thing that really sort of hit was Double Dare, which was being produced out of Philadelphia, I believe, at first. Mm-hmm. And then they finally sort of settled down into their whole creating their own studio and doing their own original content. But yeah, it was definitely, in the early days, it's just pulling content from wherever they could get it, and just to fill a network, like an early Comedy Central, or I guess Comedy Channel as it was at the time as well. Those early cable networks that before cable, it always reminds me of the Simpsons joke about the cable Choice Ace Awards, where the winner for best new comedies, Starsky and Hutch reruns or something, or best new shows. And then it's always reminds me of that. The early days of cable was kind of almost like the Wild West, just all right, now that we have to fill an entire day's worth of television, how do we do it?
Right. What's the cheapest way to possibly do this and still get away with something? Because, I'm trying to think of, you probably wrote about 15, which I think the first season was Canadian, and introduced us to Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah.
And then I think they moved all the kids down to America and did the second season in Florida, right?
I believe the first season may have been filmed in Ottawa. I don't have the exact, but it's definitely started in Canada, and then they moved it to America for a couple. Yeah, and that was like they're trying to get into more like a teen soap sort of thing. They're their own version of like Degrassi. It didn't quite take off, but it did star a young Ryan Reynolds. Is like he was like young too. Like he was like
he's like
the younger
12
like
or 13.
yeah. He was like a younger brother of like one of the like main characters, and then he was like sort of like looking up to like the cool bad boy in school and what. Yeah. So 15 was definitely. I think that was like one of the last sort of like Canadian sort of like mix and match sort of things they did there, where they were starting with something Canadian and they Americanified it with that one. Yeah.
Because that is probably what got him his U.S. working visa. So if people enjoy Deadpool, hey, 15 is what gave it to you. Because that came out at the same time, and we'll get to the guide in 1 second, but that came out at the same time as a show called Welcome Freshman that I really liked.
Oh, yeah. That's an interesting story, too. I mean, it's interesting to me as somebody who, and if it's interesting to you, then please buy my book, because if you're interested. But Welcome Freshman started off as a sketch show, but it became a sitcom for its third season. Yeah. Because like the sketch show wasn't working. As a sketch show, because obviously for this book, I was doing a lot of watching old Nickelodeon and watching shows I hadn't seen in a while. And I had not seen, obviously, Welcome Freshman did not have the legs of some of the other shows that were on the network. Like, you know, you can, like, because they have like their like Teen Nick or whatever. So you can catch a Doug, you can catch a Hey Arnold. I have the first 2 seasons of Peanut Pea on DVD. The only season they put on DVD, never put the third one out, unfortunately, because that contains maybe my 2 favorite episodes.
What are your 2 favorite episodes?
Big Pete becomes a bus driver with Big Pete
with
joins the wrestling team.
Ellen Cleghorn in that one. Yep.
When he becomes the bus driver under Stu Benedict, and then when Big Pete he joins the wrestling team, and then Endless Mike transfers to a different school so that he can wrestle Big Pete. And he has a whole sort of like pro wrestling persona he puts on as the Doctor of Death. But
there's also that great Christmas one with the Garbage Man. Yeah. And there's some great ones that season. I've had Danny and Mike on, and the urban legend is true that those DVDs were pressed and made and sitting in a warehouse, but at a last minute got pulled.
That's unfortunate that happened. I would definitely. I mean, I bought the second season the day it came out. I made a distinct run to I guess Meijer, which is a local grocery chain for people who are not familiar. It's sort of like a big sort of Midwestern grocery chain, maybe elsewhere. But like, I remember going the day it came out to buy that DVD for the second season and watch through it, because that is my favorite of the Nickelodeon shows of the '90s is Pete and Pete. For sure. I love that one. But yeah, Welcome Freshman. Like I was saying, it went from sketch show to sitcom, which I don't know if I can think of another show that's ever done that.
The only thing I can think of is like Mama's Family, which was a sketch on a sketch show that spun off to be a sitcom. But that's about as close as you're going to get. Because Welcome Freshman, it was like, it wasn't as irreverent as The State, but it was sort of around a similar time, and the sketches were sort of more like that, and then it basically became like a Saved by the Bell ripoff. Yeah, and some of the characters like changed and everything, because like it was like they would do like a lot of, it usually be like thematic sort of sketches about like a topic or whatever, and then and then there's like a couple of characters were sort of like quasi like unlikable, like there's like the know-it-all kid, and then it's just like, oh, now it's just like another not very good live action sitcom about kids on Nickelodeon, of which there was plenty of those. Right. For every Pete and Pete, there was like, 2 My Brother and Me's or whatever. Cousin Skeeter. Yeah, which was an insane mixing puppetry with live action, which that was a show that definitely not necessarily holding up super, super great. But I always think of My Brother and Me because that was the first show I watched as a kid and realized that TV could like be bad. Yeah. Like acting on TV could be bad, because the first show I watched, like, oh, these kids are bad actors. Like, they're bad at this. And I'm now old enough to realize that some people who are professionals at this don't know what they're doing. And I always think of My Brother and Me with that as like the show that introduced me to the idea, I had the revelation that TV can be bad. So that's something positive to say about that. Oh, yeah. Show. So the issue here, the reason you picked it is because on the cover we have Larissa Alanik and who plays Alex Mack, and then Irene Ng, who is Shelby Woo in the Secret Files of Shelby Woo, and so we have some Nick content here. This is the Parents Guide to Kids TV.
Yeah, that's why I noticed. Like, one, it kind of was fortuitous because I was like, oh, I want to do something maybe like around kind of like Halloween, because like I like sort of like Halloween episodes. Like, oh, this would be interesting things on TV that week. And then by fortune, it also happened to be a Parents Guide, and it happened to have two Nick stars of the era. So it all was like came together perfectly in that sense that I could I use it as a cheap plug for my book, and also is about like a good time in the TV landscape. New shows to become, and like the new TV season has already begun, and they were doing Halloween episodes. So a lot of good stuff in this issue, definitely.
Yeah, this is a great issue. I was very happy that you picked this one. And before we get to the listings proper, like right in the fold out of the cover, it goes through sort of what the Nick lineup was at that time. And this was better than I remember the lineup being, because I think of like early 90s, but this is 97. We get Hey Arnold, which is a great show. Alex Mack, which I watched because I had a huge crush on Larissa Alanik. Hey Arnold again. Kablam, which was one of the best weird shows they ever did. Rugrats, which is great. And I never saw an episode of Shelby Woo, so I don't know.
I watched Shelby Woo, and I went back to it for the book. It was solid. It's kind of like, it was like a mystery, almost like a procedural, like a week-to-week procedural sort of thing. And Pat Morita was on it. So he played her, I think her grandfather. I found some of it left on YouTube, although one of the clips seemed to be somebody who was just interested in sort of like, it seemed like maybe like somebody was, making a bootleg fetish video, because it's about her getting like stuck. It's about her getting like stuck in quicksand. It's like Shelby Woo gets stuck in quicksand. I was like, oh, I don't know. I think maybe somebody's putting this here for a different reason than just sort of like for the critical entertainment point of view. And to be fair, she may have been playing a teenager, but she was like, Irene Ng was like in her 20s when she was on. So there's nothing nefarious about it. If somebody wants to watch Irene Ng get sucked up by quicksand, it's all was above board and legal. But that was one of the handful of things I found on YouTube when I was going back to researching it. But one of the things I wrote down in my notes must have been something that was like written. There was never a better time to own a TV, and based on the issue, there's a lot of interesting things. I hadn't looked at a TV Guide in a while, and so from the ads and for things going on, and also ads for things like a Princess Di doll, which was I wrote down there's the Princess Di doll ad, and then the Star Trek The Next Generation mini plates ad in terms of like things you could buy out of the. Also, the two first things I wrote down notes-wise, one, I wrote down Slappy from Goosebumps with 2 exclamation points, because there's an interview with Slappy from Goosebumps in this issue.
Who, but then, if people don't know, is a ventriloquist dummy.
Is an evil ventriloquist dummy in the... he's like the main antagonist in those Goosebumps movies they made with Jack Black, and I believe Jack Black at least voiced him in the first one. But then right after that, I wrote down Razzle Dazzle Rice Krispies with 3 exclamation points. So that was... more exciting to me was being reminded that Razzle Dazzle Rice Krispies were a thing.
Those were Rice Krispies that had like Pop Rocks in them, basically, right?
Yeah, and like Snap Crackle Pop were like wearing like sunglasses in the ad, and so there's some amusing ads I found in there. And then I wrote down Daisy Fuentes and Carmen Electra, but I don't remember why now. I just wrote their names down.
I mean, most days I'll write down Daisy Fuentes and Carmen Electra, and I don't really even need a reason. No, both of them had moved on from MTV in 97. Daisy Fuentes had taken over to co-host America's Funniest Home Videos, and Carmen Electra had moved on to Baywatch. So they were kind of like the breakout former MTV stars who were now doing stuff not on MTV, and also very attractive ladies. So that's probably why they're in there and why you may have written it down.
It's possible, yeah. And then in terms of like, and obviously I wanted to be able to, get to what I was doing, but I want to get through all the various nonsense notes I wrote down before I got actually down to even what I was going to watch in every given day. Because I took some notes on because they interviewed Larissa Alanik and Irene Ng for the book, which I felt kind of bad in a way for Irene Ng, because like I said, she was like, I think when they did the interview, she was like 23, and like Alyssa Alanik was like 16. It's like, oh, they're making her this adult woman who's like at college at Harvard sit down with a 16-year-old child and act like they have anything in common other than the fact that they both have Nickelodeon shows. It's like they're like not having. I don't imagine having anything else in common. I just felt kind of like bad. I mean, she was talking about like how she watches. Like I wrote down Irene watches Crossfire, so I guess she talked about how she liked to watch Crossfire, and then Alyssa Olenek was talking about how much she hates smoking, which seems like a very much like a. I'm a teenager doing like I've been doing PSA, so I'm going to get my anti-smoking message in here. And then the people that watch Alex Mack, they may remember her as well. She played Alyssa Strudwick on Third Rock from the Sun, Tommy's second primary girlfriend and daughter of Professor Strudwick, who is John Lithgow's rival. One of the things I did during quarantine was rewatch all of Third Rock from the Sun. So I've got a lot of Third Rock from the Sun on the brain because I had not watched it since I was a kid, and it held up surprisingly well.
See, I never watched it, and actually, you're not the first person since I've been doing this in lockdown who's told me they've revisited that show, and I always avoided it, and I may have to check it out now because it's gotten a lot of glowing reviews from people who've revisited it recently.
Yeah. I mean, it's very broad. It's a super broad, jokey, silly sitcom, but it's, you know, for that, it's a lot of fun. Like, I mean, John Lithgow is really fun, and like people are giving really fun performances. Definitely, in terms of things I watched anew or like revisited during quarantine, it was definitely. I mean, I made it through like basically the entire run of the show, which I can't say about everything I tried. Like going back to I Dream of Jeannie only lasted a few episodes, but.
They get very samey. Yeah, Larissa Lang, she didn't really do a lot after that. She was also in 10 Things I Hate About You, which was sort of a big breakout, which I think is probably why she was on Third Rock, because she knew what's his name from that. I don't know.
Jason Gordon-Levitt, yeah.
Jason Gordon, yeah. And I saw her pop up in like a tiny cameo in Scrubs once.
I saw her. She was in one episode of the TV show Psych, where she just sort of popped up randomly, not even as the main guest star. The main guest star was Josh Molina. She was like the secondary guest star, I guess, just taking like a role or whatever. And I, not to like knock an actor trying to make a living, but I could kind of see in that performance maybe why in adulthood her acting career would take off. She seemed like she still had the same kind of level of acting chop she displayed on like a Third Rock or on an Alex Mack, which when you're like a kid actor, you can get away with a little more than when you're an adult and the pool of potential actors is a lot. She wasn't like bad. It was it's like, yeah, you still have the sort of like hammy kid actor instincts, and that doesn't work as well when you're doing adult acting.
Right. There's not as many layers of subtlety in that form of acting.
Yeah.
And that's a show, Alex Mack is a show that I am surprised that, because when they're going through the kids shows in the front of the guide before we get to the listings, there's a bunch of reboot shows. Like there's a new Captain Kangaroo. And,
yes, there is. I wrote that down.
I totally didn't remember, which makes sense because I was 17 and I probably shouldn't have been watching that anyway. But I'm surprised they haven't rebooted Alex Mack because it is basically a superhero show.
Yeah.
And you would think that the world has sort of caught up with that show where now, teenage girls and tween girls are sort of allowed to be into sci-fi and superhero stuff. And you would think it's a perfect IP for them to be like, oh, this is slam dunk. But no. Yeah,
that does seem like especially because, I mean, like, this episode, this issue was specifically not just like about like kids TV. They like says like they were aiming and like more towards like girl like actors, like on like television for girls, and like they like were focusing sort of like on more female oriented sort of like programming, which is partially why they had the interview and what have you. So yeah, definitely I could see that being a show that could, especially also special effects would probably be better than they were then, even on like a lesser budget, look better when you turn into a little globby thing of goo and
imagine the puddles we could have today.
Yeah, you could have some really, abyss level puddle sort of animation for when she's doing, like when she would glow when she was like embarrassed or nervous or whatever. That could look probably better than it did then. And speaking also of Alex Mack, I had to also know there was a whole section in the issue where they were running down like novelizations of like TV shows, and they were grading them all. And I noticed that partially because I actually was already familiar with those Alex Mack novelizations, because a few years ago I bought a bunch of them used for my girlfriend at the time because I had already was quite familiar with those books, and then they were like talking about like there's like how like what pop culture literate they are, and for whatever reason they had a thing for every book of whether or not they had an Alanis Morrisette reference in it. I noticed, and apparently a lot of them did. And they gave the Moesha books an A+. So apparently, if you're looking to read a 90s era novelization of a TV show, TV Guide thinks the Moesha books are perfect because they gave them an A+, which means like they thought they were top of the no notes.
And they probably didn't have Alanis Morissette reference in them either.
It's very possible that they may have. Although that made me remember something that a few years ago now. The guy who created Clarissa Explains It All wrote a novel version of it called Things I Can't Explain, about Clarissa as an adult, which I have read that book, and it was weird. It was a weird read, to be like that dude writing like sex scenes and writing like a Clarissa and Sam sex scene, and that was that. And Ferguson is in jail for insider trading and all that stuff. Yeah, very weird book.
It is. I read that as well, and it's weird because it's not fan fiction because it's the guy.
Yeah.
And so it rings very true, but is still like, I feel like I should have just left it. Like I didn't need to kind of catch up.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we get these updates, we get these dark reboots. We could have a dark Alex Mack reboot, like, via Sabrina, who knows?
Get a Snyder cut on Alex Mack.
Yes, exactly. Yes, we need her. She has the black suit. Let's dive in. What'd you do on the first night here, which is Saturday night? I'm gonna guess you went with Snick All Night, but I might be wrong.
Well, in terms of things I wrote down, there is that, but it was kind of actually, in terms of what I would have actually been watching at the time, it was actually fortuitous in a way that the issue got me was from the Puget Sound, which is up near Canada, because personally, at this time of year, what I'd be watching a lot of times on Saturday night would be Hockey Night in Canada, because I've got CBC, the Canadian channel, because I was right there growing up in Detroit, right across the river from Canada. So, and I grew up a big hockey fan, so I would watch a lot of Saturday nights. Obviously, some stick would be involved, but a lot of watching Hockey Night in Canada from the CBC. And, so shout out to the CBC, especially because also one time, like the CBC used to have a thing on their website where you could just submit pilots for consideration. And I was like, yeah, sure. I'll do that. And I did. And then I heard back from like their head of development, and he was like, hey, this is actually really good, but like, we're just like curious, like, are you like Canadian? Because like we want to move forward with this, but we can't do it if you're not Canadian. At which point I had the fortune to say, well, no, I'm not Canadian. I did say, like, oh, my grandfather was born there. I was like, well, maybe that will actually help me because that was true. But then they're like, oh, sorry, we can't go forward with it. So, but still, I consider that one of my greater TV successes because like it's just like I had like, sometimes like I found like other like Canadian TV shows. Like I guess I went down this like avenue because like when you're like in LA, nothing's happening. It's like, well, fuck it. I can go to Canada. I don't care if I can get a TV job right there. Sure. And then I would like email like shows and production companies and like always hear back from the Canadian production companies and the Canadian TV shows. Always very polite, always very nice. Always be like, but we have to like sort of like hire Canadians only because of like tax reasons. And like, it's like we get tax breaks or whatever. But like I had like most of my like best like professional writing, like TV writing, like interactions with Canadians and people working for the CBC. So I just want to shout out the Canadian television industry for being very polite and very nice and very patient with a desperate American just looking for any work. But that night for Hockey Night in Canada on the 25th, it was the Calgary Flames playing the Toronto Maple Leafs in the early game, and then the late game, the Pittsburgh Penguins playing the Canucks. But I did write down other things that I definitely would have found myself potentially watching. Snick that evening, 8 o'clock, Rugrats. I believe it was probably a Halloween episode, I'm not sure. Then All That at 8:30. Keenan and Kel airing at 9. And then Kablam at 9:30. And those are all shows I definitely watched at the time. Probably Keenan and Kel was my favorite of those and the one I would have most been interested in watching. And one, when I revisited the show for the book, actually, Keenan and Kel holds up pretty well. all things considered. They had some, people working that show that were pretty, because I think like Neil Brennan got to start writing for that show, so those were the stick shows airing at that time, 97. But also I wrote down because this is what I watched a lot of times on a Saturday night as well. Although I feel like they would show later in the night as well. But Mystery Science Theater 3000 would air on. This was in the Sci-Fi Channel era.
The first year on Sci-Fi Channel. Yeah,
and the episode that was airing this Saturday night was Riding with Death, which I believe was one of the TV pilots that were sort of like. I believe it's the one with Ben Murphy in it. And
yes,
just thinking about
Becomes Invisible. It was. It was actually a short-lived series. It was directed by Alan Levi, who's a guy that I know, and they had edited them into movies like they did with the Master for Master.
With the Yeah. So definitely, but I used to feel like when I would watch MST3K on Sci-Fi Channel, it'd be like they'd be showing it like on like a Saturday night, like at like 10 p.m. and then I had to stay up like super late, which was no problem for me because. I mean, obviously, it's not surprising given that I've written a book about TV and I'm on this podcast that I would spend many nights just watching TV all night. And so, being up to like 1 or 2 in the morning watching TV was like not abnormal for me. So I would do a lot of watching MST. And also I should, actually prior to my Nickelodeon book, I wrote a book about MST3K that came out a few years ago prior to the reboot. So it's maybe 10% out of date, but it's mostly holds up if people are interested in that show and where that book's still available as well. But yeah, so obviously, Saturday night, because it'd probably be watching either some Snick or some MST3K or, these days, like, and now going back watching now, I'd be watching, MST3K because to me it's an adult. It, holds up maybe a little better than all that, middling sketch show that had some talented people on it, but it had some decent sketches. But sketch shows are hit or miss as is,
and it's a kid show.
And it was kids sketch show. But this was the heyday of Snick. Well, I don't know about the heyday. The heyday is probably when like a Peter Peter or Clarissa or Our Feet of the Dark would be on.
A little earlier, I think. Yeah. Like, Ren and Stimpy. The less said about Roundhouse, the better. But that's just my opinion. But yeah, this would have been Snick or Treat, I think, which they would. The Halloween edition. It would have really fun sort of wraparound segments. Usually. Later, they would usually have like a Melissa Joan Hart or somebody hosting Sabrina, and so that probably would have been what was going on that night. But yeah, I think you've chosen well there. It's for a couple days before Halloween, the movie selection not that great that night. You have like Halloween 2, which is decent, but then you have Wolfen. And there's also a Real World marathon that night. This is 29 episodes of the show. Wow. And I was a sucker for Real World marathons, so I probably would have dipped in and out of that. Sunday, what'd you do?
Sunday, well, what I would have been watching, although I think Sunday would have been when I happened to notice that because I watched professional wrestling as a child, but I wouldn't have probably gotten this pay-per-view, but Halloween Havoc happened that evening. And I would like to note that the main event that evening, Roddy Piper went over Hollywood Hogan in a steel cage match. And then also Randy Savage beat Diamond Dallas Page in a Las Vegas sudden death match. Those are the two matches I wrote down. But what I would have been watching at 8 o'clock, always watching The Simpsons. That was my number one show at the time and my number one show now. And of course, given the era, this was Treehouse of Horror 8. And I believe that episode was, the middle one was the first one is Omega Man, where Homer's the last guy left on Earth, and then there's all the mutants. Second one's Fly vs. Fly, which is one of my favorites. I really like that one. I enjoy one of my favorite Simpsons lines is when Bart's body with the fly head comes out of the little matter transporter, and then when Marge says to Homer, I think it's Bart, and he says, yeah, I think you're right, the pants are a dead giveaway. That's one of my favorite. And then the third one, not quite on the same level. It's the one where like Marge is like a witch. It's not quite as good. I think the first two are like classic Treehouse of Horrors. That third one's maybe a little weak, but overall, this is still like peak Simpsons, and that's like a really good Treehouse of Horror episode at 8.
There's some weird stuff that night. There's a ABC Wonderful World of Disney movie that's based on the ride, The Tower of Terror. And it stars Steve Guttenberg and Kirsten Dunst.
Yeah, I wrote down Tower of Terror because I remember that, but I didn't write down who was in it. But I noticed that because that's about the time I think the ride was being introduced, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely don't remember that movie happening. But I don't, but that's, quite the cast for their TV movie.
There's also that episode of Touched by an Angel that night, which is a show I do not enjoy, but I am kind of amazed by the plot of this episode. It's 4 HIV positive girls, including a teen played by Thora Birch.
Oh, wow.
Agree to commit suicide at a summer camp where the angels are supervisors.
What? They agree? Like, who are they agreeing with?
Each other. They have like a suicide pact because they all have HIV. Like, what a grim show.
Yeah, I was like, in my mind, like some like camp was like, you guys should all kill yourself. They're like, you know what? I agree. Yeah, it's like, yeah, we all agree. You should kill us.
X gets the square. I'm going to agree.
We have a quorum. We're all gonna commit suicide. Yep. Wow. That's wild.
Yeah, that's a crazy plot for Touched by an Angel. So you're watching The Simpsons, and then did you go with King of the Hill?
I went with King of the Hill at 8:30, following Simpsons up with King of the Hill. I didn't like the show as much, but I always would watch it. It was a solid show. I enjoyed it. I believe they were doing a Halloween episode that night as well, because it's, 'tis the season. So I followed up Simpsons with that hour-long block of cartoons there with King of the Hill as my 8:30 show, yeah.
And then I normally would have gone X-Files, and this was, I think, the cliffhanger that led into the first X-Files movie, if I'm remembering. But there's something I'd never heard of before, and I'm kind of intrigued by it. There's an ABC Sunday night movie right after Tower of Terror called The Devil's Child. And it stars Thomas Gibson from Dharma and Greg, Kim Delaney and Matthew Lillard, and Tracy Walters in it as well from Repo Man, one of my favorites. And it says, The Devil, Lucifer, the Prince of Darkness. In other words, the father of her child. So it's sort of like a Rosemary's Baby 97 thing, and it looks amazingly bad. And I feel like I need to hunt it down and watch it.
For sure. I'd like to say that Repo Man's my all-time favorite movie. I have a press kit from the era that they gave out for the movie. My brother got that for me for Christmas for a couple of years ago. That has like their actual like universal press kit for like when they were releasing the movie. So that is an all-time favorite of mine. Now at 9:00, I was not really an X-Files fan at the time, and I'm not like a particular fan now. It's more like a hunt and peck, pick and choose episode sort of thing. So at 9:00 nowadays, I would be watching Daria because I like Daria. It's a good show. I think I was maybe starting to get into Daria at the time, so I may have watched it then as well. But it's more likely that I put Nick at Night on and was watching Happy Days, because then I have at 9:30 followed up with the Wonder Years, because like a lot of watching Nick at Night was a big part of my childhood. And I haven't seen Wonder Days in a long time. I think maybe did it end up streaming somewhere? Because I know there was rights issues because of the music.
It did, yeah. They sorted out the music issues. They released them all on DVD. I actually have it. Came out in a locker. I have it somewhere in this mess. And it did get released. I don't think it's streaming right now, but it was showing on a couple of cable channels for a while. Yeah, and I think that actually takes place in the suburbs of Detroit.
Maybe. I know Freaks and Geeks does.
Freaks and Geeks does as well. And the funniest part is, both of those shows were shot in Burbank.
Yeah.
So when I think of Detroit suburbs, I think of Burbank, which doesn't look anything like.
Yeah, no, definitely does not. Yeah, and then Home Improvement also is another show that set in the Detroit suburbs as well. But definitely, I've probably been watching Happy Days at 9 because I liked Happy Days at the time. Doesn't necessarily hold up a ton to adult eyes because I watch a MeTV on occasion, and Happy Days is not one that I'm really like enthused to like put on for a little while there. But as a kid, I enjoyed the antics of Fonzie and Chachi and all the Happy Days gang. So that's I feel pretty confident it's probably what I've been watching on that Sunday night.
But it's a show that went on so long. It's like 3 different shows. Like the first sort of quarter of that show where it's shot on film and there's really no like it's pretty good show, and actually has an amazing Halloween episode where they have this party in like an abandoned funeral home, and Richie Cunningham comes in this like cool skeleton outfit, and then it goes to multicam shot on video, and it's just god awful.
Yeah. But yeah,
Wonder Years is always good. That show is just quality start to finish.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen it much since I was a kid watching it on Nick at Night, but definitely my memory holds up, better certainly than some of the other shows that old sitcoms I caught on Nick at Night, like the Munsters, which is something I had on the other day because I had like flipped over to it because when I'm watching like over the air TV, and it was on I think it's on that Cozy Network or whatever. And man, the Munsters does not hold up. That show is just trash. It's so weird because it's like.
The Addams Family does, though.
Does. I was just going to say, as a kid, my feeling that those shows were, like, inverted. Like, I like the Munsters, but, like, Addams Family I didn't really go for. But as an adult, Addams Family definitely holds up and is, like, a solid sitcom, whereas Munsters is just so painfully unfunny and, like, poorly executed. Is just a show that I can't stand watching for even, like, a couple minutes at this point.
It looks better. Like, it looks more, because they look more like monsters, but then that's the whole gimmick. It's just a regular kind of standard 60s sitcom, whereas the Addams Family's written brilliantly, and they're just complete weirdos. Like, it's just mental. So it works so much better. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the Addams Family is about what sort of, like, comedy sort of like cameo from the era can we get to come hang out in the front room of the Addams Family house where most of the action's taking place because it's doing like their old sitcom set pieces and like then scare them away. That's one thing about watching the show. It's like, man, this family hangs out a lot of time in this one main front room of their house because it's just like. Well, you can't build two sets. That's insane. You wouldn't want to do that. Now, Monday night, before we get into your picks here, there's an ad for Baywatch that's going to start airing on USA Network. And they're showing it at 4 and 6 p.m. So they're like, you need an hour in between to recover. But it's one of the weirder campaigns. It goes, "You'll regret ever learning how to swim." Which kind of negative to me.
It seems like a Touched by the Angel episode. Yeah,
I'm like, are they trying to say, like, it's better if you can't swim because then you'll almost drown and be saved by one of the Baywatch people?
I think it's like, you'll wish you couldn't swim because then, like, you'll be saved by, like, David Hasselhoff or Yasmin Bleeth or whatever, and you'll get mouth-to-mouth from some, like, studly, sexy sort of, like, TV lifeguard. I think that's the thing they're going for there.
I can back that. So Monday, what'd you do?
Monday at 8 o'clock, Hey Arnold is doing their Halloween episode. I read the blurb of it in the issue, and they're basically doing a ripoff of War of the Worlds, which is a classic thing for TV shows to do. So start with Hey Arnold, which is a classic of the era in Nickelodeon. Particularly like that one I feel like it sort of like spans like and bridges the gap between like early 90s kids and like late 90s kids of like. The kids who grew up watching like Doug and Pete, and then the kids who grew up watching like SpongeBob and like Rocket Power or whatever. I feel like Hey Arnold sort of like bridges that gap between us as the show that. Then also I wrote down Frasier must have been airing at 8, but on a Monday it would have been probably a rerun. And I think I wrote down Frasier. There's more Frasier, so I need to talk about Frasier right now because there's new Frasier episodes. I just love Frasier, so when I saw there was a Frasier episode on, but
it is a rerun. You're correct.
Yeah. Because I have the new episode written down. I believe it's spoiler alert coming up on Tuesday. But so I would have definitely been watching Hey Arnold at 8 o'clock, and following it up at 8:30. I decided I was going to watch a pop-up video on VH1 because I liked watching that show as a kid, and I was introduced to a lot of music videos and a lot of I tweeted this once that I'm pretty sure. I learned who Chevy Chase was by watching the "You Can Call Me Al" video on pop-up video.
Right.
Like that was like my introduction to who Chevy Chase was, and that just like gave me like sort of like a nice like nostalgic feeling of pop-up video. Like if I could go back and like watch something, I'd be watching pop-up video on VH1 at 8:30 after watching Hey Arnold. Sort of like maturing into like an older child. Like I'll watch Hey Arnold, but then I'm gonna watch Pop-Up Video, and there'll be little sex jokes.
Yes, because Pop-Up Video was a pretty brilliant show for people that don't remember it. It was sort of like a visual director's commentary for the videos with facts and stuff, but they would really structure their facts really well in that it almost always did like a callback joke at the end of the video. Yeah. And it was really well done. Like the research must have taken forever. And it was really entertaining, even if it was, videos that you had no interest in.
Yeah.
They were always interesting to watch on Pop-Up Video. And I would watch that most of the time as well. It was fun, and it was only on for a couple years, but felt like a really long time.
But I think they either rebooted it or were going to reboot it, because I remember 100% trying to figure out if I could get a job writing for it. Is there some way? Because I think they were either going to try to reboot it or they maybe did briefly, but then not last in this modern era of TV and music videos. But definitely, I remember watching it. I feel like they showed reruns of it after school for me or whatever. So I feel like I was watching it more around then than watching it actually in prime time. But it was on, so I definitely decided to throw that on.
And then at 9, what'd you do?
At 9, I went with what I would have been watching at the time, which is professional wrestling, because Monday Night Raw kicked off at 9 o'clock, and this was, I think, the beginning of and then also Monday Night Nitro would have been on. I think that started at 7 when I looked in the TV guide. So I must have I probably would have started watching at 7 and put on here, but when I was a kid, although, was I still watching? I think I was probably still watching wrestling in 1997, because then there was a little period of time where I stopped watching it. But then when I was in junior high, it was cool, because that was when Stone Cold Steve Austin and Degeneration X were going on, and everybody was wearing DX t-shirts in junior high that said "Suck It," and it was a very cool thing to do. And I don't think I could find anything that piqued my fancy otherwise. And so I just figured I almost definitely, because when I was a kid, most Monday nights I was watching, professional wrestling in one way or another. So I probably was flipping back and forth between Raw and Nitro that 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock hour.
So if I'm remembering, and one of my listeners who's rabid about wrestling will tell me if I'm wrong, because I may be wrong, but WCW at this point had sort of taken all the 80s WWF wrestlers and were using them, and WWF, which was Raw, they had sort of gone into this more adolescent, irreverent, kind of dirty, sort of crass, which sounds ridiculous, but thing going on. You passed up Buffy. This was the first season of Buffy. This is their first Halloween episode. Not the best season of the show. But
the first season of Buffy's a little rough.
Yeah. But at 9, I would have gone with Sybil, because this is the Halloween episode, and it's a great show. It's very fun. But I specifically remember in this episode that Alicia Witt goes full goth. In her Halloween costume, and as a 17-year-old, I was like, "Oh, good lord!" So I definitely would have gone there. And then at 9:30, I probably would have flipped over to Buffy or George and Leo, which was not a great show, but it did star Bob Newhart and Judd Hirsch and took place on Martha's Vineyard. So I probably would have gone there, and it's a Halloween episode.
Yeah, maybe because I growing up, and I watched Bob Newhart show. I watched Newhart. I even watched Bob when it was airing its original episodes, but I'd never seen an episode of George and Leo. I'm a fan of Bob Newhart. I have a few seasons of the Bob Newhart show on DVD, because I watched the first 3 seasons on Hulu back in the day when this is back in the day when Hulu was just had things. It wasn't a subscription service or whatever. You would watch TV shows with that, and then they only had the first 3 seasons, so then I had to, I'm invested now, so I bought the rest on DVD. And I recently bought the 4th season of Newhart on DVD, because I haven't watched Newhart in a while, and the internet said it was the best season, so I wanted to give it a shot. But I don't know George and Leo, and also never really watched Sybil, but I've considered it, because I think it's streaming on something, maybe Amazon Prime. So maybe I'll give that a shot.
Sybil's fun. It's a good show, and I love Newhart and the Bob Newhart show, but Newhart's one of my all-time favorites.
Yeah, the Bob Newhart show is the one that was airing on Nick at Night at a quasi-reasonable hour when I was a little kid who was inexplicably really enjoyed those kind of sitcoms that were definitely not for me. I've said, I'm pretty sure this section when I was 6 years old, my favorite show was Dragnet, which doesn't seem to make sense. I just found it. now as an adult, like, oh, it's just like Jack Webb being mad at hippies. But like as a little kid, it's like this mysterious world of like, oh, what's this Los Angeles and what's this like, he's like these serious like cops are like doing all this stuff. So like I just like love dragging at it. Like I really love watching like Bob Newhart's show, like Mary Tyler Moore's show, even though I could not possibly like Mary Tyler Moore's plight as like a unmarried 30-year-old single woman in like making her way in like a career was definitely not geared towards a 6-year-old in the early 90s. But I don't know, I just always television always just spoke to me, and so I would just always be just like, even if I couldn't understand it, I just like loved living in the world of television like when I was a kid.
Yeah, no, I mean, same for me. And those shows were almost more appealing because they were so different from our experience. It was like a real treat to sort of get, a peek into that world. And it was kind of exciting.
Yeah.
So I'm going to guess, and I have some insider information that on Tuesday at 8, you might have done Frasier.
Yeah, well, is it on at 8?
Oh, no. Is it not on at 8? No,
I thought it was on at 9.
It is on at 9. You're correct.
Okay, so yeah. At 8 o'clock, I have Alex Mack, because at 8 o'clock, Alex Mack was airing on, because the way they're doing like Nickelodeon at times, like they show like one sort of like transitional show from like the early Nick, like during the day, which is like when like, because a lot of things in my book are things that aren't necessarily coming up on like a prime time, because they're airing like during the daytime, like, airing strictly showing them after school. But at 8 o'clock, they would show like a show that's kind of like for older kids, and then they would go into Nick at night. So at 8 o'clock, Alex Mack was on. I'm pretty sure they had what the episode premise was, but I didn't write it down. But I think they wrote down what the episode was about in the TV guide. It was.
Let me see here. Nick's Secret World of Alex Mack. Alex fears her doctor will identify her condition.
That's right. Yeah. Which which I can definitely, I don't necessarily recall the episode. It reminds me of an episode of Third Rock that I was watching where John Lithgow's character has to go in for a physical, and obviously he's an alien, so there's all the things about that. But yeah, Alex Mack was a show I definitely watched and enjoyed, and I, was kind of for a little bit older because kids, so like, like I could still like justify watching it even as I was getting a little bit older. Like, I wouldn't have been like watching maybe a show that I deemed for like being for like kids who were like a little bit younger. But Alex Max definitely would have still stayed in the viewership, so that would have been my 8 o'clock watch. And then at 8:30 nowadays, I wrote down News Radio is what I would have been watching, but I didn't watch it at the time. I wrote down NHL Tonight because that was on at 8:30 on ESPN, and I would be like, I probably would have, if I was watching TV, I probably would have thrown on NHL Tonight and watched that on ESPN. But obviously now News Radio is
such a great show. Like, just a really, really great show. This is still the Phil Hartman era. This is an amazing episode. At 8 o'clock, I probably would have gone with Clueless, the TV series, which is actually a really good show because it's the Halloween episode, and I would have had to go for that as well. 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock. 9 o'clock is when Frasier was on. It's the episode where Roz finds out she's pregnant, and Frasier has his Halloween party. Niles has a Halloween party, a costume party at Frasier attends, and that's a really solid episode. I believe, though, somewhere in the TV guide there was like a blurb for this episode that I thought was kind of judgmental of Roz. It was either like in the big.
It's not the blurb. It says Niles' literary costume party is the setting for a particularly scary Halloween for Roz, who thinks she might be pregnant.
I think maybe there's like a big ad that says something about like Roz's like, lifestyle coming back to haunt her or something. Oh, jeez.
Yeah, because in the ad here it says, is Frasier masquerading as Daphne's lover? But it doesn't.
Yeah, it must have maybe it's like a little side like thing or something, or I've invented some insane.
Yeah, that just might be how you really feel. About Roz.
Yeah. But and then also I wrote down Home Improvement because in truth as a kid I would have been watching Home Improvement, but now as an adult I would 100% be watching Frasier because Frasier is one of my favorite shows and I love Frasier. But at the time Home Improvement was maybe more my speed. And I believe this is a Home Improvement where like Mark is like makes like a horror movie sort of thing and like freaks his family out. I'm assuming it was when he was a goth by this point, because late in the show's run he became a goth. And Home Improvement's maybe a little better than you might imagine. It's not a good show, but I've watched some episodes of it in recent years. Like, you know what? This is not a bad sitcom. It's not good, but it's not like, you know, I mean, Tim, you know, Allen's not like who's a Michigan guy and like got his like start here and everything. And, you know, a lot of shout outs to Michigan and Detroit sports and Home Improvement. But Home Improvement, I feel like, is actually a decent enough sitcom, all things considered. It's no Frasier, but it's not like, you know, there's a lot of worse sitcoms than Home Improvement.
Yeah, I mean, I always hated it, but I don't really know why. Like, I didn't like the main cast. I think that was a big part of it. Tim Allen really just bothered me for some reason. It just didn't feel like, I had no frame of reference in that. Like, it didn't feel like a world I was familiar with in any way, shape, or form. And I hated the kids. Hated them so much.
Yeah, that's kind of like, I feel like the later seasons are better actually because the kids are a little older, and like even like when Jonathan Taylor Thomas has left the show, but like when Mark's like kind of like a teenager and he's like a goth, like Brad's basically ready for college or whatever. I feel like it's a little better because like the kids are a little less in the way of the show. And but yeah, obviously, I mean, if I'm comparing shows like Frasier below Home Improvement, I don't the one as a kid, Home Improvement's like, oh yeah, it's like in Detroit, and like, you know, it's very slapsticky. Whereas like, you know, well, Frasier could be pretty slapsticky, but
if you're comparing Halloween episodes as a kid, one about a goth kid making a horror movie and one about some doctors dressing like literary characters, like there's really no contest.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And then before I get to like my 9:30 thing, I wrote down, I don't know if it's aired on Monday or Tuesday, but I remember there's a big ad for a Hulk Hogan starring movie called Assault on Devil's Island. I believe it was airing on TNT.
Yes.
In like, you know, because Hulk Hogan was a star of WCW at the time, which aired on TNT, and there was like some insane like movie starring Hulk Hogan that was airing on probably would have aired on Tuesday night, because on Monday night it couldn't have aired.
It was Tuesday. It was Tuesday night. Yeah, this ad is insane. It has Hulk Hogan with like really long hair, like he looks like Lorenzo Lamas. It also stars Shannon Tweed, who was the queen of the erotic thriller in 1997, and Carl Weathers. And it says, I cannot believe this is the tagline: "The right arm of justice just got bigger." Like, that doesn't even make sense. Like,
that makes no sense.
I never even heard the phrase "the right arm of justice." Like, that's not a phrase.
No, I've heard the long arm of the law, but I've never heard the right arm of justice.
Yeah, this is after Navy SEALs abduct a drug lord, his henchman retaliates by kidnapping a team of U.S. gymnasts.
Wow, I wish I could track that down.
Yeah, I need to see this now. So that's Tuesday. Wednesday night, what'd you do?
Oh, well, I'll just say real quick in my 9:30, I didn't get to for Tuesday. But no, it's just watching Bewitched on Nick at Night. It's, you know, tis the season for Bewitched. So let's see. Oh, nope, gotta go to my second sheet now. Here we go.
We are on sheet 2.
Yeah, all right. Okay, well, I know what I have as a being watching, but for some reason I put the word trucks in quotation marks, and now I have no idea why. Because
there was a TV movie on Wednesday night, and it is it's not even a remake of Maximum Overdrive. It is the original Stephen King story Maximum Overdrive was based on, was called Trucks. And so it's an adaptation of Trucks, and it's on USA Network. And I actually really like the ad for this, and it's actually a really funny ad. It says, "A fresh twist on the old possessed trucks go nuts and kill everyone" idea. Like, it's such a funny ad. A group of strangers at a truck stop must unite to face an unlikely but deadly enemy, trucks. Tim Busfield is in it. It's a great Stephen King adaptation, and it kind of knows how dumb of an idea it is. And I really like that. I need to rewatch that. I totally forgot it existed.
Yeah, but in terms of what I had Wednesday, I think was the day I had maybe the most sort of like a little bit of issues with trying to find stuff like without just like repeating things. I wrote down 3 potential things I could have watched at 8:00. One would have been to watch a half hour of the movie Clue, which was airing, which Clue's I think it's kind of like a polarizing movie. Some people love it, some people hate it. Spin City was airing. I don't think I would necessarily watch that as a kid, but
it's that show.
And then there's an episode of The Nanny on with a guest appearance by Dr. Joyce Brothers. And if I'm being honest, that's probably what I would have watched when I was at the time. Now, probably I'm going with Spin City, but at the time, because I don't really think I watched that then, but I know I watched The Nanny here and there then, definitely. I watched The Nanny the other day for the first time in a long time because I was getting free previews of channels through Sling, and so a lot of them are showing had old TV on demand. I don't remember which one was doing The Nanny. My guess is probably Logo because they show a lot of old.
Oh yeah, they do show a lot of them. Yeah.
So probably I'm going with The Nanny with the guest appearance from Dr. Joyce Brothers. It's my 8:00 show on that Wednesday.
So you did not have any interest in the Tony Danza show, despite it being a Halloween episode, which I didn't either. Spin City That Night is not quite a Halloween episode. It's an episode where basically like a Howard Stern what is it? Challenges the mayor to a mock election to see if he's more popular, and it's very 1997 shock jock, but it's a fun episode. And then what'd you do at 8:30?
At 8:30, I probably would have been watching Happy Days, but I already mentioned Happy Days previously. So also Beavis and Butthead was airing, and being I was at probably a good age for Beavis and Butthead, to be kind of like funny but still kind of like transgressive. So if I wrote down Happy Days because if I was being honest, it's probably what I would have had on, but it's also potential, like if my parents weren't around, I may have thrown on some Beavis and Butthead, because it would have been, so if my parents weren't around, probably would have snuck a little Beavis and Butthead. Otherwise, I'm just having Nick at Night on. Although also have been tricky because because I have a younger brother and a younger sister, and I don't know if I could have gotten away with that, flipping that over to that with them around. Cause this is a time when things were less sort of disseminated. And so a lot of watching TV with the family sort of situations. So it's maybe I could have snuck away for a little Beavis and Butthead, but most likely not. But
did were your parents very strict about what you could and couldn't watch, or like that one you were just like, that is over the line?
They weren't strict. They were neither lenient nor strict. They were nice. Cause I grew up watching The Simpsons, and we watched MST3K together, and so that could be risque a little bit too. But they were more drawing the line at a South Park. Right. So a South Park was too much. R-rated movies that they hadn't previously seen were I remember one time I went to a friend's house and I watched the movie Predator when I was 11 or so, and then I went back home. My parents were like, "Man, you shouldn't have watched that. That movie's not appropriate for you or whatever." But they weren't super strict. But I think a Beavis and Butthead, they would have more been disapproving, but not no dice.
Right.
Just been that's that's not really appropriant for you.
We're not angry with you. We're just disappointed in you.
It's
that kind of
more
thing.
We don't I don't want you watching that. I don't like you watching that, but not being you can't watch that show. But so it was I had enough leniency that I wasn't being sheltered by any stretch of the imagination, but I also was definitely not watching whatever I wanted whenever I wanted at that time period, for sure.
Did you go with Third Rock though?
At 9?
Yeah.
There's a Halloween episode. I may have been watching that, or I also may have been watching the Drew Carey show because I watched both those shows.
I love Drew Carey.
I was a fan of Drew. At the time, I think maybe Drew Carey's show a bit better than Third Rock, although that was not a Halloween episode of Drew Carey, interesting enough. I believe it was an episode about his girlfriend struggling with her weight. I believe it was when he's dating Nikki, the woman who's she was a contractor, a contractor, I guess, or whatever, handy woman, as it were. Yep. And so Third Rock is even now, I don't know what I'd go with. Well, a Halloween Third Rock episode, I would definitely watch the Halloween episode over, because I love holiday episodes of sitcoms and TV shows.
Absolutely.
I love a Halloween. I love a Christmas. So I'd probably have to go with the Third Rock there. But Drew Carey show, definitely I wanted to shout out as well because I really enjoyed that show as a kid. When they would do their episodes where they do things like wrong and like try and pick up the things that are wrong, or like when they do their live episodes and they just do their, that was like a really sort of like out there. Although I stopped watching it around the time that Drew fell into a coma and then came back as Steve and Mimi's baby.
Yes.
I felt like kind of jumped the shark there for me at that point in time. But
that was like season 7 or something. Like, it had been a long time. And that show had a lot of great gimmick episodes and a bunch of good Halloween episodes. This is not a Halloween episode. So I think Third Rock makes sense.
Yeah. Because I think, there's the one episode where Drew meets the devil or whatever, I think, and that must have been a Halloween episode. Or that's a show that may have just randomly done.
Yeah,
that,
who knows? Yeah,
yeah. Because they're like, oh, you know what? Let's have Drew meet the devil and sell his soul this week. Like, yeah, fuck it. Let's do it.
No one's gonna stop us. And then what'd you do at 9:30?
At 9:30, because I feel like it was airing on Cartoon Network like every day of the week at 9:30, and I just bit the bullet on this Wednesday night and went with the Flintstones. Or considering watching a half hour of Top 10 Countdown, which I think was on MTV or VH1, but it was the music countdown thing, like of popular music videos at the time. Because I would watch VH1's Top 10 in the like the mid to late 90s before TRL became a thing, basically.
And it would all be Sheryl Crow.
It was a lot of Torn by Natalie Imbruglia topping the charts.
Yep.
A lot of How Bizarre by the Ohana Millionaires Club, and I think Fastball's the Way maybe showed up in there a lot. Definitely getting Lisa Loeb, of course.
Did you just list what OMD stood for?
No, I'm saying the Ohana Millionaires Club.
Yeah. Wow, I'm impressed.
Yeah. A couple, I believe they were from New Zealand, maybe.
Something like that.
Definitely also some Lisa Loeb, a little probably Stay at the time.
Yep.
But also because I don't love the Flintstones. In terms of classic cartoons, it's not a favorite of mine, but it's good enough.
Yeah, it's okay. I prefer the Jetsons if I'm going that era.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Although when DC, I'm not a comics reader by and large, but when DC Universe was a thing, I had a free trial of it. I got to watch that Harley Quinn show, but also I had access to you could just read comics on their website. And so there was Flintstones run they did they did a few of their classic cartoons and they did a Scooby-Doo one that was a zombie apocalypse thing, Shaggy's a hipster, Scooby-Doo can actually talk. I only got a couple episodes into that. And then they did a Jetsons one that I got one episode in that was kind of dumb, but they did a Flintstones run that actually was really good. I'm not a comics reader, so I can't speak to the quality of comics in general, but the Flintstones comic that DC did, that whole run is actually really good. And so, if you're a comics person and haven't read that, I would recommend. I'm a non-comics person. The comics I've read are the ones I bought to mount, on my wall as display, which means it's Batman 66 meets Archie.
Yep.
Archie meets the Ramones.
Yep.
Let's see. I must have an. Oh no, just another Batman 66 one, and then a Saved by the Bell one I got.
Yep.
So that's my comics knowledge. Just buying them to display them. But saying I spend money on this, I'll give it a quick read first. But that Flintstones comic was actually just it was a really good and interesting sort of thing. And so for comic people out there, yeah. So that's my 9:30. Gonna watch a little Flintstones on a Wednesday night.
Yeah, it's a little palate cleanser before bed.
Yeah.
So Thursday night we're 2 nights before Halloween, so they're amping up the movies. What'd you do?
Yeah. Well, I noted that Nick at Night was doing a Halloween marathon, but I did not go solely with that sort of stuff. Because I said at 8 o'clock I was going to, because there was some I think maybe it was airing on one of the movie channels or something, but I was going to catch a half hour of Scooby-Doo meets the Boo Brothers.
Yep.
Because I had to because I like Scooby-Doo. I've watched a lot of Scooby-Doo stuff. There's some good Scooby-Doo, there's some bad Scooby-Doo, there's some Scooby-Doo that's fun to watch in an ironic way, and some stuff that's actually legitimately good, Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated and Be Cool Scooby-Doo, both good shows.
Yeah, I actually like a pup named Scooby-Doo too. There's pretty good episodes of that.
Yeah, but I figured I'd catch a half hour for the season of watching Scooby-Doo meets the Boo Brothers just to get a little bit of a change in there, because I wanted to, throw a shout out to Scooby-Doo, who's, a timeless character with all his, and the whole Scooby gang. So, And I figure you can pop in and watch a half hour of a Scooby-Doo movie, not necessarily be lost, and then also pop out, even if you don't finish it, and not feel too worried about it.
Yeah.
It's like, oh no, I'm missing out on this, very, important sort of like Scooby-Doo storytelling. It's one of those things. Like there's those movies that like, you've like, maybe you watch them once, or maybe you don't even watch them once in full ever, but it's like, it's like if it's like on, you can like flip over to it, watch it for a few minutes, like you have it on for a little bit, and it's like a good movie for that. It's like you don't really care about watching the entire thing. You're not going to get sucked in.
It's comforting, but, sort of background noise. Yeah.
But you can like throw it on for like like 20 minutes or for like a half hour, or like I feel like because the other day I did that with like the Great Muppet Caper. It's like, it's like not like a great thing, but it's like, yeah, I can throw it on. There'll be a couple songs. Maybe Charles Grodin will be in for the time I'm watching it. That would be nice because but like, yeah. So I started off with Scooby-Doo meets the Blues Brothers at 8. And then at 8:30 to avoid watching Happy Days again, I figured I'd watch a half hour of a not Halloween movie that was on, Caddyshack.
Yes.
I figured, well, why not? So I'm going from watching a half hour of Scooby-Doo to watching a half hour of Caddyshack, which is a good movie. I'm not like a huge fan of it. I don't think it's great. I don't think a lot of those old classic comedy movies of that era hold up super well. But Caddyshack's got some funny jokes in it, at least.
Yeah, my controversial opinion, which I've espoused on this show to the chagrin of listeners, is that I much prefer Caddyshack II to Caddyshack.
Wow.
Much. I think it's a much funnier movie.
That is a bold, because like what I like about Caddyshack is like Bill Murray and like Chevy Chase and like Ted Knight are funny in it, and like the second movie is not really involving. I guess Rodney Dangerfield is kind of funny too, but like there's some bits in there that like because like of those movies, because like I don't think like Animal House is like a good movie at all.
I'm not a big Animal House guy,
but like I think Caddyshack is good but not great. So like a lot of those movies of that era, like those classic comedies, like don't necessarily like hold up to me, like yeah. But I can throw in Caddyshack for a half hour. I hope I'm not catching like some boring half hour or a half hour that's like focused on Danny and his girlfriend's possible pregnancy or something like that,
right.
Or like get a half hour of like good jokes. Maybe a half hour is Bill Murray heavy, and then like watch him do his thing and move on from there.
Yeah, it's a movie that I'm like, if it's on and there's literally nothing else, I might throw on there, but probably not. I would be intrigued by the first hour of John Carpenter's remake of Village of the Damned, which I've only seen once. I saw it in a drive-in theater in 95 on a double feature with Waterworld, which I have also not ever seen again. So I'd be intrigued to watch that. And then the Seinfeld at 9 has...
That's what I although I have to say, it's maybe my least favorite Seinfeld episode.
This is the one with my friend Dana Gould is in it as Frankie.
Yeah,
and Toby Huss, who is Artie the strongest man in the world.
Yeah, listen, I love Artie, the strongest man in the world. I also, I know, Dana Gould wrote for The Simpsons. I listened to his podcast. And I think he's, good. This episode it's one that like when it was showing in replays or reruns, I would skip over a lot. But like, oh well, I guess I'll watch that one. The whole thing where George is trying to make his parents jealous, so he sets out to make a move on his like cousin, and then his cousin is into it, and it just felt like, and like even the stuff with like Dana Gould's fragile Frankie Merman character or whatever, and like Jerry buys the van, and like it's just I feel like it was really because I feel like it's kind of like later in Seinfeld. I know it's later in Seinfeld because it's 97. It felt like the show was kind of like really spinning its wheels in that episode, and just like it's one of my least favorite episodes of Seinfeld. Like, it's not bad. Like, there's not really much in the way of like bad Seinfeld episodes, but like, it's definitely, if I was ranking every Seinfeld episode, and I've never done that. Although if any website out there wants to pay me to do that, I'm happy to do that.
Next book.
I've done many a ranking of episodes of things, so I'm not against doing that.
But I think this is when Larry David had left, and to sort of make up for it, they really cranked up trying to make the episodes like even crazier, and instead it kind of just backfired mostly.
Yeah, but like, yeah, and so, no knock to Dana Gould, because I'm sure there's a lot of, Dana Gould fans who don't listen to this podcast. I'm sure there's a lot of, Venn diagram overlap there.
He didn't write the episode. Yeah, he's just in it.
And I think he is solid in it. It's just like that episode, though. does not work super well for me. But I still would probably watch that. But also, apparently, at least some channel that were showing at that time the movie Gorgo, which was a movie shown in an episode of Mystery Science Theater 3000. And I made note of that as well. But I would have been watching Seinfeld. Not a good, even if it's not one of my favorite episodes, it's still, better than a lot of things that are airing on TV in that half hour. And it's Seinfeld. So I go with it. Seinfeld's a show that didn't really do much in the way of holiday episodes, other than obviously the famed Festivus episode. But they didn't really go. I mean, there's the episode that's sort of about the upcoming millennium, but they did not really do Halloween or Christmas or anything. Well, there's the one episode where Elaine gets the Christmas cards or a nipple showing, but again, this little small things, not big things, which I guess they kind of fits in with the sort of like ethos of the show. But it would have been nice to see like a Seinfeld take on like a Christmas episode. It would have been an interesting thing to see what Larry David thought of as a Christmas episode.
It's such a Jewish show, though. Like the vibe of that show, it's so not Christmas. Gorgo's a weird one. Gorgo's a 1961 British movie, and it was on Mystery Science later, but it is basically a British take on Godzilla.
Yeah,
which is weird.
Yeah. It's a good episode on my C3K. I don't know if I wanted to sit there and watch the movie necessarily.
There's two.
Yeah.
There's a thing I'd watch and a really weird thing. One of them is Rock and Jock B-Ball Jam. Rock and Jock basketball. And I would
watch that.
But then there's a thing on ESPN2, and it's called B3. And what would you guess B3 stands for?
I'm trying to. Bob Ballaban Baseball.
Bikinis. Bob Ballaban Baseball would be an excellent thing. I think that was a Nintendo game, Bob Ballaban Baseball. But this is B3 Bikes, Blades, and Boards.
Oh,
which
weird.
doesn't tell me a lot about it either.
Yeah, I feel like that's weird because the X Games already existed at that time, but the X Games started. I think it was already on ESPN starting in 95. And Bikes, Blades, Boards sounds like a X Games-esque thing, like an extreme sports sort of thing. But I believe Bob Ballaban Baseball, you could get that game packaged with Bill Lembier's Combat Basketball.
Yes, it was it's a good double feature. And you saying X Games just made me realize that they meant rollerblades. Because I'm thinking like motorcycles, switchblades, and like surfboards here. And
no, that's more like exciting. That's like a 60s exploitation movie, or like the. What was that thing that Showtime did where they made like modern
Rebel Highway?
Yeah, where they're making like modern, like Joe Dante and a bunch of directors made like modern takes, like on. I remember like reading about like they basically wanted to like make those sort of like old exploitation movies, but able to make them like R-rated for modern times, like like Joe Dante and other directors of that sort of like style and vintage. Like I could imagine like Bikes, Blades, and Boards in that vein being one of those sort of movies. Speaking or whatever.
Speaking of which, even though it's outside the purview, at 10 o'clock on HBO is an episode of Perversions of Science, which was sort of their sci-fi Tales from the Crypt-ish type show. But this episode is directed by Tobe Hooper, and it's kind of a take on War of the Worlds. And Chris Sarandon is in it from Fright Night, but also Jason Lee, Jamie Kennedy, and friend of the show, Lorraine Newman.
Oh, well, yeah, it's quite the cast there. Shit, I was gonna say something related to. I was gonna say something like in terms of like things like airing like not in the purview of the thing. Like I could have just like noted all these very different things, but because like they were showing Saved by the Bell episodes like all the time, like after the only one I noted was that on that Tuesday they were showing the Saved by the Bell episode where like they show the time capsule video.
Oh yeah.
Where like you got all these random new kids show up and they show like the time capsule one that that just caught my eye for a reason. I just had to write that down because like Saved by the Bell was something that I obviously watched a lot of as a kid and also in college. When I was in college, the one semester I spent living in a dorm at a college, like it's not like a commuter, which was not for me as my insomnia and misery for that semester would indicate, but every day from like noon to 1 p.m. they would show an hour of Saved by the Bell, And so I would like, even if I had class, a lot of times I would be like, I'm just going to stay and I'm going to watch Saved by the Bell for this hour. And then I believe they showed A-Team on some channel from like 2 to 3. I think maybe MacGyver was also airing at that time. So a lot of watching TV in the afternoon instead of going to class.
A better education. Education. You probably could have saved some money, but.
But one thing that always happened was that we had me and my roommate that we had a habit, and I don't know how this happened in one semester and multiple times, but we would catch the first part of the episode where Jesse's stepbrother shows up.
Oh yeah.
But whatever, either we'd have to go to class or like it wouldn't like be airing. We never got to catch that second part on like literally multiple occasions in one semester of college. I sort of like 3 occasions we saw that first part of that stepbrother episode, but the second part we would just keep missing or whatever. It was just a weird circumstance that kept happening.
Have you managed to go back and revisit it as an adult and finally see that second part?
Oh yeah. I saw. I've seen it before then. I've seen it after then. I've seen them. Fix everything up, and with the car, and Jessie punches her stepbrother in the face and gives him a black eye or something like that. Also, I remember now, I didn't write it down, but one of the Saved by the Bell episodes that was airing was the introduction of Tori.
Oh yes.
So there's also a Tori, the introduction, Leanna Creel showing up in the. So it must have been that. No, yeah, I guess that makes sense. Also, they're showing that future episode too. But as Saved by the Bell, in terms of podcasts I listen to, the Go Base That podcast that April Richards used to do. I was a big fan of that. But Saved by the Bell is not on, streaming or anything anymore. So it's been a bit since I last saw it.
Again, my other controversial opinion, I prefer the new class.
That's preferred. I thought you might be about to say you prefer the college years, which
Oh no.
It's like, I like Bob Golick as much as the next guy. I like the actor who played Professor Jeremiah Lansky. He plays Howard on Better Call Saul now. Patrick Fabian, I think his name is. Yeah, he played Professor Jeremiah Lansky on Saved by the Bell. As much as he's a fine actor, but that show is or the woman who went on to play the woman who gets killed in Independence Day, who works as a stripper alongside.
Oh yes,
yeah,
I cannot remember her name, but no.
Her character's name was Alex, which is weird because the 2 new women on the show were named, I believe, Nikki and Alex, which is also the name of the twins that Jesse and Aunt Becky have on Full House, which is a
conspiracy.
And, the only good part of Fuller House was when the kids, that the now adults who play Nikki and Alex, got to show up and play Nikki and Alex and like act as like not babies. And I was amused by that. And honestly, they were better than, some of those adult actors, now, because Fuller House was a trash show I could not finish watching. But I did like seeing that that the Nikki and Alex got to show back up, even though like they were literally like toddlers when that show ended. But they're like, okay, yeah, sure, we'll bring you guys back and let you, act in a couple episodes.
They're playing the long game. Playing the long game.
But at 9:30 on that Thursday, I figured 'tis the season, and because they were airing it, unusually because it was not normally airing at this time or on this date on Nick at Night, but for the Halloween Marathon, Addams Family was on at 9:30.
Yeah,
and so I figured I'd give Addams Family a watch. Though, like I said, I didn't really like it much as a kid because, like, when I was a kid, in summers, Nick at Night would do Block Party Summer.
Yep.
Where they would do their block of programming and obviously they did Addams Family Wednesdays at one point. I remember skipping over that, even though I watched Welcome Back Kotter Fridays, even though Welcome Back Kotter now is a show that doesn't hold up. But I really liked that show as a kid. I really enjoyed that one as a kid. There was like Munster Mondays, I believe. At one point there was Bewitched Wednesdays, but obviously they changed it to Addams Family at a certain point. I think Jeannie may have been on Thursdays, maybe Lucy on Tuesdays. But yeah, I remember Addams Family would do their Wednesdays and I would skip over that day on Block Party Summer and do whatever else I was doing on my summer nights then. But I would watch Welcome Back Kotter, which was the thing that fascinates me about that is what happened with Gabe Kaplan and the actress who played his wife. I can't remember her name, unfortunately, but basically there's like a dispute between them and like with the show about and basically she won it. And so on Welcome Back Kotter, Gabe Kaplan became like a tertiary character on his own show.
Yeah.
That's like a weird sort of fascinating television sort of And then like obviously John Travolta left, some random assholes came in who I couldn't even watch those episodes. And I was a Welcome Back Connor fan as a child somehow. But yeah, so I don't think it wrote down what Adam Sandler episode it was, but every Adam Sandler episode is basically the same thing.
Yeah, and you can't really go wrong.
Matter.
I don't think I've seen a bad Adam's Family episode, to be honest. I mean, it's only 2 seasons or 3 seasons anyway, so
it was a brief run.
So Friday night, we're almost in Halloween. It is Halloween.
It is Halloween on Friday night, yeah.
What are you doing?
Well, presumably after I got home when I still have been trick-or-treating in 1997, I think it would have been the last year basically I trick-or-treated was 1997.
Do you remember what you dressed up as?
Oh, let's see. What would I have been in 1997? I probably was past pirate, I think I had like some sort of, I just had some like Halloween mask, like a spooky sort of face. It had like holographic or hologram eyes, it had like sort of like weird spooky eyes and like had like a fangs and like blood. I think I probably just wore that and like probably like a black hooded sweatshirt and like like black pants or what have you. It was just some sort of like random scary individual, and so that was probably would have been what I did. No specific character, just like found the spooky mask at a Halloween shop that I thought was cool and like wore that, and that was my Halloween costume. So presuming I was home from trick-or-treating by 8 p.m. Also, probably would have gone out with my friends as opposed to going out with my parents, my brother, and my sister, because I would have been a little old for that. But let's see here. I would note that that episode of Sabrina the Teenage Witch that aired that night, because it was not just Friday, it was TGIF Friday.
That's right. It was Halloween a big TGIF. Night. It was a big night.
Sabrina the Teenage Witch had an appearance in the band 10,000 Maniacs, which is fitting. But I probably would have been. I also noted that there was a basketball game on between the Jazz and Lakers that may have popped on. But it said that Space Ghost was airing. I'm assuming that Space Ghost Coast to Coast that was airing and not the old like Space Ghost show. So I probably would. Oh, nowadays I'd be watching Space Ghost. At the time, more likely to be watching Sabrina. Not necessarily enthused to be seeing 10,000 Maniacs. Not necessarily interested in Natalie Merchant products at the time. But also I noted that Ernest Goes to Jail was also on at that period of time.
But so not Ernest Scared Stupid, which would have been perfect.
But although maybe they, thought what's really scary is going to jail under false pretenses as opposed to or whatever happens in scares. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
And then but also there's basketball on, which maybe would put people in the mood to watch Slam Dunk Ernest, one of the lesser Ernest movies, which is really saying something when you call something a lesser, Ernest movie, because they aren't necessarily known for their, none of them are going to be making the Criterion Collection or ending up in Cahage du Cinema.
Well, they will if my letter writing campaign takes off.
Yeah, get enough good reviews on Letterboxd.
That's right.
We need to spam Letterboxd with 5-star reviews for all the Ernest movies, asking them to be released on Criterion, and then maybe we can make it happen. Or at least that Panoply app I see sometimes. I don't know what it is, but they have movies or something that seems kind of more artsy. But let's get even if it's just like a collection, like an Ernest collection, they can do like one of those super cheap DVDs I see on Amazon sometimes.
The Mill Creek collections.
Yeah, you see like 8 movies. It's like 8 westerns that have like nothing together other than they're westerns. They're really cheap. We press them all into one like 2 DVD collection somehow.
$4.99.
Yeah.
Weirdly, The Great Pumpkin is on, and it's on Halloween. It almost never airs on Halloween. So like I'd have to do that.
This is maybe me giving a controversial opinion of my own, is that I'm not really a fan of Peanuts or Charlie Brown, or so I'm not really super enthused for the.
How dare you? Interview over.
Yeah.
No, I love Great Pumpkin, and I love the Charlie Brown Christmas, but don't really.
Yeah, I just know. I mean, I'm sure I probably would have watched it potentially as I believe also I don't know if it's starting at 8:00, but. Maybe that's why I wrote down the word Rocky. Maybe I was short for Rocky Horror Picture Show and not Rocky, the Sylvester Stallone movie.
Yeah, they're showing it on VH1. They're showing Rocky Horror Picture Show.
But is it starting at 9 or did I just write it down at 9?
9:00 it's starting.
Okay. We'll get there. Because there was one Halloween. I saw it for the first time on a Halloween when I was at home handing out candy. So like I was definitely too old for trick or treating. And I was at home handing out candy at like my parents' house. And I don't think it wouldn't have been this year. it could have been the very next year, maybe 1999, but we'll get there. Because at 8:30, the only thing that could possibly be watched is Family Matters, because it's the return of Stevil, the evil ventriloquist dummy. Shout out to, Slappy and his interview, which I thought, honestly, for, back to the Slappy interview, which is obviously just like a bunch of like jokes some like writer, put together. Probably somebody who worked for TV Guide who like had, maybe worked for like a sitcom for like a season or something. Like, not terrible for like a joke interview in a TV Guide. I thought there's a couple funny lines in there, all things considered. A lot of wood puns and what have you, but it was still. And I was like, when I saw that in there, I was like, oh, this is like a ridiculous thing. And it is a ridiculous thing to have an interview with the ventriloquist dummy in an issue of TV Guide, but they did a decent job of it. But yeah, Family Matters was like, I was not like a Family Matters lover or anything like that, but I definitely watched it. And definitely, if you tell me right now I can watch an episode of Family Matters where Urkel's got an evil ventriloquist puppet called Stevil, I'm definitely tuning in for that.
Especially since there's an evil Carl ventriloquist dummy in this episode as well, called Carl's Bad.
I saw that in the
There is an interesting thing on E! That night called Haunted Hollywood that is a tour of Tinseltown's spookiest sites, including haunted hotels, a celebrity cemetery, and the locations of infamous deaths. Also, reenactments of unsolved mysteries, and here's the weird part, hosted by John Astin.
Oh, wow. John Astin, Gomez Adams.
Exactly.
And I think I saw, this is not, but the other day I was trying to remember because I watched an episode of the Donna Reed show, just one episode at random, because, quarantine's been happening and I got to watch stuff, I watched like 4 or 5 episodes of My Favorite Martian, which is better than I thought it would be.
Yeah, Ray Walston's great.
Yeah, and I think Bill Bixby's a good sort of like sitcom actor too, a good sort of, but I watched one episode of the Donna Reed show that happened to just have Cloris Leachman in it, and as like, apparently she's only in one episode, and also I was trying to remember who played like the hairdresser, like Donna Reed's character was hairdresser, and I could not remember it, but then you just reminded me it was John Astin.
Oh, amazing! Now I have to go back and check. Yeah,
and he's like, it was like just like weird because he didn't have a mustache, so it was like and he's also a lot younger. But I know somebody who studied acting under John Astin at Johns Hopkins, actually. Like he had him as like an acting teacher, obviously long after.
He still teaches. He still teaches.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
In his 90s.
Wow, that's really, and then now I'm trying to, because he was married to Patty Duke, right?
Correct, yep.
Yeah, because I remember her always on the Match Game being Patty Duke Axton, but it's like, I know there's some connection there, but I was trying to like figure it out because
and he's Sean Astin's stepdad and Mackenzie Astin's biological dad.
Yeah, because I just I remember because I think she's Patty Duke, and then she became on the show at some point was introduced as Patty Duke Astin. But this is as much as I love talking about Sammy's Match Game, it's not correlated to anything because of going on at this period of time, because I don't think there's I don't know if they ever did Halloween episodes, maybe because they would do always like New Year's Eve episodes.
Yeah, I don't know if they did on Matching, but they did on a lot of the other like Price is Right would.
Yeah.
What'd you do at 9?
At 9:00, that's when like I said, Rocky Horror Picture Show came on. Right. But then I thought maybe I'd watch that for a bit. But also Child's Play 3 was on somewhere. And so I thought maybe I could consider a half hour of that. Or I saw there's some show called In Search of History on that was doing an episode about sort of like Frankenstein and the history of Frankenstein. I thought that might be kind of interesting to watch. So, because I'm not a big fan of Rocky Horror Picture Show. I mean, it's 'tis the season and everything like that. But I'm not a huge fan of musicals. And it's, Tim Curry's great, obviously. And, and I can appreciate any movie that will inexplicably stop down to become like quasi like rock and roll Elvis-esque musical, so Meatloaf can ride around on a motorcycle and then get murdered.
Bikes, and boards.
The movie literally stops down to do that, and then he's like murdered, and then so like I can appreciate that, and And I appreciate, as somebody who like, obviously is a fan of like pop culture, I can appreciate all the sort of like connectivity to that. But I just don't know if I love the execution.
It's not my favorite movie. To me, it never lived up quite to the hype of it. And also like not watching it in a theater with a bunch of people, you kind of miss a lot of the whole thing. And if you don't have nostalgia for it, it's sort of a thing. I'm absolutely watching Millennium. This is the sort of X-Files spin-off show with Lance Hendrickson. It's a Halloween episode. It's a really great one. I totally did watch that and would again.
Yeah, like it's like, like I didn't really watch. It would have been at that age probably too spooky for me at that age, when I was, like a kid. This was like probably a little too mature for me at the time. Would have been like, because it's like I like to at that age like dip my toe into things for more like a mature audience. But like you don't want to go too far because then I'm still young enough that I still have
scar yourself.
At the time. Yeah. You don't want to get too spooked out because I was still like young enough that I could like be like afraid of like some like noise outside my window being some sort of like boogans or ghost or what have you. Or like when I was like
boogans.
Yeah. When I was a kid, I had like these karate fighter toys, and they got revamped at some point where like they would make noises like yeah like hi-ya noises, like karate noises, and like when they got like knocked off their little pedestal thing, it'd make like a screaming noise. But after a fashion, as those toys sat in my closet as a child and deteriorated, they would go off randomly. Ooh. So on occasion in the middle of the night, I would be awoken by a screaming noise coming from my closet. And eventually you get used to it. But the first time it happens, you're very startled when you hear a scream coming from nowhere out of your closet. Yeah. And eventually you realize it's like, oh, it's just my karate fighters toys. There's not a screaming, like, boogeyman in my closet,
It's not a monster. It's just karate figure toys falling to their death. Nothing to be alarmed about.
Because after, it's like they're totally safe. They were able to do a karate fighters tournament on WWF television that when they came out. I remember there was a lot of there was the thing like various wrestlers were fighting karate fighters against each other in a tournament. But I think that may have been, I believe Jerry the King Lawler cheated in his, because he was in his villainous way. But that is just going down the karate fighter.
It's a whole other podcast. Karate fighter specific podcast.
Got 9:30. Did it get to 9:30? I went off on a karate fighters tangent before we got to 9:30, and then I got a couple of other things I wrote down. At 9:30, I considered a Frasier rerun, but that's not great. And then Wacky Races was on. I was like, oh, that might be kind of interesting.
I do love Wacky Races.
Something called Monster Mania was on. I don't remember what that was, but I wrote it down.
It was a documentary show on AMC. It was like a little half-hour thing. Elvira hosted it. They would be.
If Elvira hosted it, I'm probably watching it.
They would be about like monster records or like Famous Monsters magazine or something like that.
Yeah. And also Step by Step was on, which I watched sometimes. So probably as a kid, I was watching that, or maybe Wacky. But yeah, nowadays, if Elvira is hosting this Monster Mania thing, I'm probably checking that out, see what Elvira is up to. See what the old Mistress of the Dark has up her sleeve,
right?
Or she would probably stay down her blouse or what have you. Does a nice entendre, to Cassandra Peterson wants to go back in time and use that. She can be my guest. And then I wrote down there was an advertisement for something that said Ice Goes Country because Ice-T was starring in some sort of a weird sort of like movie or made for TV movie or something that I saw that was on that Halloween, or it was at least being advertised on Halloween. I don't remember. All I wrote down was that the part where it said Ice Goes Country. I don't remember what it was specifically in there.
Yeah, is I had to look this up because my knowledge of Ice-T's acting career, I will admit, is not amazing. I know it's a shock to people, but it's not as good as some of the other things. And I believe this is a TV movie called The Deli. Is this the one I'm looking at? No. No, I have no idea what this is. Totally stumped, but now I'll have to figure it out.
Yeah, because I just saw it was like they're making a big to do of the fact that it was like Ice-T was like obviously the rap individual primarily associated with rap going country as which like a reverse Garth Brooks, Chris Galva. He didn't go the rap, but
Right.
Garth. I wonder, when did Garth Brooks host Saturday Night Live as Chris Gaines? It feels like it was around this time period.
It was around 97, 98 because it was around like NSYNC and Backstreet Boys and all that. Yeah.
Which that's when I started watching. That's also when I started watching Saturday Night Live, because that's like I was a tween. I feel like that's when people started watching Saturday Night Live traditionally, is like when they're like 12, 13, like 11, 12, 13. And then of course that cast becomes the cast they consider the best cast of all time.
Of course.
Although, for me, that was around, I think, I was going to say when Will Ferrell began, but Will Ferrell, I think, began a little later than that. I'm trying to remember.
Would have been roughly, not between 97 and 2000, I think. Yeah,
because I remember, when I was really first started watching, it was like a Will Ferrell, Chris Kattan sort of, era, Molly Shannon, and sort of all of those individuals. So that's sort of like my era. But Tracy Morgan, I think, was already on when Garth Brooks was on, because I remember them doing that bit. And then the last thing I wrote down, because I was curious about, because in terms of late night television, who was being the guest leading up. So I wrote down who on a Halloween night, Conan had David Hyde Pierce and Fred Savage on as his guests. So
what a combo! There's a cop movie for you.
Yeah, so it's because when I was growing up, I think that's probably because that was the only ones who were interesting. Because I was also curious who Letterman had on. Because when I was a little kid, I watched Letterman because what my dad watched, and I would stay up and I liked to watch Letterman until the celebrities came on, because I was too young to care about celebrities. But I liked watching Letterman do his Letterman stuff and do his shtick and do his top 10. But then when I got into late night TV on my own, I was a Conan O'Brien fan, so I was curious. And I would watch that episode of Conan. I don't know what sort of Halloween stuff he may have been doing, but I was because I'm sure he had some sort of gimmick going on or whatever, because he usually did. But I wasn't quite. Wasn't watching Conan at that point in time, because even if I was staying up really late, I was probably just watching Phyllis on Nick at Night or Rhoda on Nick at Night.
You weren't doing cutting edge Conan at the time, yeah.
Those are the shows that would air really late. Nick and I remember is during the early hours, the stuff that was popular, like I Love Lucy. But if I stay up late enough, I could watch Rhoda or Phyllis or shows that weren't spin-offs of the Mary Tyler Moore Show. But those are ones I distinctly remember, especially Phyllis, because it was just I only got to watch it one time, and it was at 2:30 in the morning or something.
It was a badge of honor if you could stay up late enough for Phyllis.
I watched that one, but so that's I guess Conan would have been airing past midnight, so the witching hour of Halloween. Well, I guess this would have started in the witching hour.
He would have been, it would have been you would have got into All Saints Day. It would have been the Day of the Dead when you were done with Conan that night. Yeah, and that's a good way, you get your Halloween candy. In my case, you watch David Hyde Pierce talk about what's going on in Frasier, and then I think Working was on. Yep, Working was on.
So that's what Fred Savage would have been doing. So I didn't watch Working, but I remember seeing that. Just the many things.
Just as you crash from your sugar high, that's what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. You fall asleep and have weird dreams of Niles Crane spawned by eating all your sugary candy and eating those what sugar daddies are you're young, so you don't have to worry about ripping your teeth out from eating a sugar daddy or
because they'll grow back. They'll always grow back.
That's
the week. When is the book out?
The book, as of this recording, is this spring 2021 is what they're saying. It's already on the spring. It's already in their spring catalog, and it's already available for pre-order. They don't have the exact specific date out at this moment, but it's coming out in the spring. By the time you hear this, it may even be out, or there's a date for it. You can pre-order it right now from the director of the publisher, from McFarland Books, or it'll be available wherever books are sold. Or if you want more information, or you want to tell me that I'm wrong for not liking peanuts, or you want to know what I'm covering in my book, I'm on Twitter at Chris X Morgan. Or if you're a Canadian TV show and wants to give me a writing job despite the fact that you won't get tax breaks, I'm still available.
All right. Well, we'll get you there. Let's get Chris to Canada. We'll move him up there. Thank you so much for doing this. It's been great talking.
Oh yeah, no, thanks for having me on. It was great to talk about. I realized how like precarious and dangerous it would be for me if I had access to like all these like TV guides and what have you. Because like I was just like looking through the stuff that wasn't even like related to the conversation. I was just like really just like, all the stuff airing during the day, all the Nick shows, all the ads. It's just like I could just like spend so much time going through all that stuff and seeing what was airing, and like it was like a good weekend. I'm glad I was able to combine the whole kids TV Nickelodeon thing, 2 Nick stars on the cover with Halloween. It's combining
it's the peanut butter and chocolate.
Yeah. It's speaking of Halloween, you Reese's peanut butter cups. Yeah, it's like 9-ish Nickelodeon and Halloween combined into one perfect pairing. So thanks for having me on. Let me talk about TV. It was a ton of fun.
The Reese's peanut butter cup of television. That's Chris from Detroit. Pre-order his new book. It should be out very soon. I will put up links on tvguidancecounselor.com and all the social media at tvguidance, at Kenneth W. Reed and all that. Or if you want to email me, you can do so at tvguidancecounselor@gmail.com or ken@kenreed.com, and I will put up the link to get his book there. In the meantime, you can buy his Comic Galaxy Mystery Science Theater 3000 book pretty much anywhere. So just search for that and buy that there. Speaking of buying things, you can be a member of our Patreon, patreon.com/TV Guidance Counselor. I am trying to get people to enjoy it. I'm not great at Patreon, so if you have things you'd like to see as tiers, extras, that kind of stuff, I will do my best to do them. I tend to bite off more than I can chew, but we'll see what I can do. Also, you can buy TV Guidance Counselor merchandise either at iCanRead.com or at our TeePublic store. We have a TeePublic store /user/TV Guidance Counselor. There's Ken Reed stand-up comedy merchandise on there. There is TV Guidance Counselor merchandise on there, including our cool blacklight poster that you can get on t-shirts or hoodies or phone cases, whatever you want. And I get $2 per thing you purchase, which is very helpful, and you get something fun. That is it for the week. We'll be here next time, so I hope you will too, for a brand new edition of TV Guidance Counselor.
Nothing nefarious about it. If somebody wants to watch Iron Man get sucked up by quicksand, it's all was above board and legal.